a lot. And this is one of the things I tell anyone who wants to be a good writer. First, you must be a good reader. So I was a voracious reader, but I never thought I had the creative chops to be a writer. And maybe that's what life is about. Often, life is what happens to us while we are planning other things. There's a story which kind
Well
of
said.
grabbed my soul, and I started writing it just for myself. I didn't really think where it was going to go. I wasn't thinking like a practical middle class boy. I was writing just for myself without realizing it. Perhaps I was living what Lord Krishna advised us in the Bhagavad Gita, karmane vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. I was just enjoying my karma, wasn't thinking of the fruits of my karma. कि यार ये किताब success होगा या failure होगा, वो किसने सोचा है? I was just writing for myself. That's another thing that I advise to the students or youngsters who are watching this, that when you make your life decisions, use your mind and your heart. Don't just jump without thinking. You should never suppress your heart. Like if I had said, yaar, ye writing kaun karega, chodo, let me just stick to my job, I would have been so unhappy. If you suppress your heart, then zindagi bhi koi zindagi hai. But if you listen only to your heart and don't use your mind at all, bina soche samjhe bas kood gaye, then often what is your dream becomes your nightmare.
Right.
Imagine if I had a great book idea and I went next day I went to my office and told my boss, "Bhar mein jao, main apni dil ki sun raha hu." Now it took me 4-5 years to write the book, and after that the book was rejected by every publisher it was sent to. I finally self-published. यार उस समय तक भाई महीने के अंत में जो बिल्स जो आते हैं, who would pay that? So you have to be practical and pragmatic in your decision. Heart and mind, दोनों सुन के. Because of the tremendous sacrifices my parents made, right? At the end of their lives, they had no savings because their only savings was the education of us, 4 of us children. No house, they had nothing basically. And slowly now the family has become wealthier. So now all of us have houses, everything. But
Right.
by the time we got into jobs, the 4 of us children, my parents had absolutely nothing except the education of their 4 children.
Right.
But because they did that, we could succeed so much more. And it was the sacrifices for our parents. And again, there's some suggestion that I want to give, that all of us who are young, we should never forget that we stand on the shoulders of our parents, on the sacrifices that they have made for us.
Absolutely.
And we should always remember that. We should always be grateful for that. All publishers rejected the book because they said that, boss, your book has everything that could be wrong with the book. That's what I was actually told that. I said, I was told, ki, boss, the main market are the youth. I was told. I'm talking about 2008, 2009. Main market are the youth. The youth are not interested in a religious figure at all. Okay, they're not interested in religion. You have to write campus romance novels, or
Yes.
write some office, some sex scandal novel, right? Things like that. That's what you do. I said, but that's not the story idea that I have in my mind. Then they said the second thing, that your books are too long. They said, ki, youngsters, I was told youngsters have no attention span. Books should only be 100-150 pages. You write 400-500 pages.
ये आपने इतना बड़ा क्या लिख दिया है मतलब?
इतना कौन पढ़ेगा? And the third thing I was told, which I thought was the most insulting thing, they said that if you want to become mass, you have to dumb down the book. And you'll notice most of the books, all that they work, are all at a very base level. But your books are, all high IQ. You're speaking of philosophies every second chapter, and you want to draw connections and you want to make it complex. And they said, no, the youngsters are not interested in high IQ stuff.
Yes.
So I was told my books are a guaranteed flop. That's what I was told. Guaranteed. I self-published my first book. It took off in the first week itself. And the irony is most of my readers are actually the youth.
Yes.
And that's the point I'm trying to make to you. This assumption that the youth like only dumb things. They They said that no one can know the one truth. They didn't say that it's a set of lies agreed upon. They said, how can anyone know what is the one truth? We can only know our truth. Like, for example, we say we've had a conversation. Okay, I had some recollection of this conversation. You had some recollection of this conversation. We had an interpretation of how this conversation went. 5 years later, will both our interpretations be exactly the same?
No.
No, of course not. Because mine will be my truth, yours will be your truth. Now, this has been said, this concept has been told repeatedly. In the Rig Veda, for example, they say, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha Vadanti. In the Asya Vamasya hymn, truth is one, but the wise speak it as many. In the Nasadya hymn, it's a creation hymn. And at the end of the hymn, essentially they are saying, how can anyone know how creation happened? You know, the creation of the universe. They say, how can anyone know how creation happened? Imagine, this is the wisdom, not even the gods. Okay, this is the wisdom of Indian ancestors. Now, if you see it from this perspective, first problem, excessive Delhi focus. Okay, I'm not against Delhi, it's an important city, but it's not the only part of India, boss. There are many other parts of India. Okay?
Yes.
You'll notice in our history books, if an empire was not based out of Delhi, it is wiped out of our history books.
Yes.
Unless the empire is too big to be ignored. The Mauryas are the biggest empire ever in Indian history. Is because of this, we have an impression of our history that our ancestors were a bunch of cowards who lost every single battle for the last 1,000 years. We are taught that we are a defeated nation. When the truth is actually the exact opposite. India is the only pre-Bronze Age culture that is still alive. Every single other pre-Bronze Age culture has been wiped out. Those same Turks who came to India went to the Arab world as well, went to Europe as well.
Yes.
Okay. So essentially, two groups of people, the Turks and the Europeans, wiped out every single ancient culture in the world. Violently, most of them violently. Pharaonic Egypt, Mycenae and Greco-Roman, Gilgamesh, Mesopotamia, most of the Celts, okay? I'm in UK right now, yeah? The Nordic culture, all these cultures were all wiped out. Only one culture is still standing. Aaj tak khadi hui hai. Kyun? India. And why is India still standing? Kyun? Because our resistance never faltered. हमारे ancestors लड़ते रहे, कभी हथियार नहीं डाले उन्होंने. So we lost some battles, but we won some battles as well. Which is why we are still alive. If we lost every single battle, बाकी सब की तरह हम भी मर गए होते.
Right. Yes.
So the last 1,000 years is not a story of, in my mind, is not a story of cowardice and defeat. It is a story of heroic resistance. The kind of resistance that did not happen anywhere else in the world. Nowhere else in the world. It is heroic resistance. And our culture is still alive. This is the cover of the Suhail Dev book. Thank you. So this released mid this year, and the Hindi edition of King Suhail Dev's book, Maharaj Suhail Dev, has been released just a few weeks back.
Wow.
And King Suhail Dev is perhaps the most consequential Indian hero who you've not heard of. Okay, this was I'll take you back to the 11th century. From the 11th to the 16th, 17th century, the Turks were the military superpower of the world. The Turks are originally not from Turkey; they're originally from Central Asia. Okay, and they didn't just conquer and destroy much of India. They also conquered and destroyed much of the Arab world, much of Europe. They were the foot soldiers of the Mongols who conquered and destroyed much of China. They were the military superpowers of the world. right?
Mhm.
How did they make, and they, like someone like Timur, who was a Turk, right? 800 years ago, he killed 5% of the world's population at that time. 5% of the world's population. Think about it. In those days, there were no nuclear weapons, no dynamite, no machine guns. It wasn't easy killing. Killing,
Yes.
killing actually took a lot of work.
Yeah.
And you can't just drop a bomb and kill 1 million people. You had to actually stab, behead. It wasn't easy killing people. And in that manner, he killed 5% of the world's population. And he was just one of the Turkic Mahmud Ghazni was a Turk, Alauddin Khilji was a Turk, Babur was a Turk. They were all Turks, right? And they were the military superpower of the world for 600, 700 years. And these two, defeat almost everyone. The Fatimids were Turks. They were all Turks. Okay. Sorry, Mamluks were Turks who ruled Egypt. They were all Turks. Ottomans were Turks. Seljuks were Turks. They're all different tribes of Turks. Okay. And at a time when they were going around massacring much of the known world, and the Ghaznavid Turks, Ghazni, Mahmud Ghazni, they had entered India. There is this king called King Suheldev, okay, a subaltern caste Hindu. He's not an upper caste, subaltern caste Hindu from a small principality called Shravasti, forges an army together of Hindus of all castes, of Muslims, of Indian Muslims, of Indian Buddhists, forges an army together and defeats this invading Turkic horde, defeats them in such a comprehensive manner that no Turkic tribe dares to come back to India for 150 years. They went to other parts of the world. They didn't come back to India for 150 years. Is this a story we should know or not? What an inspiring story.
Absolutely.
And it's a battle that he fought called the Battle of Bahraj. And the difference between King Suheldev and many other kings of that time was, it's almost, he was a lot like Chhatrapati Shivaji. He came some 600 years after King Suheldev. But both of them had the same attitude. Ki Shate Shatyam Samacharit. If you're facing a cruel enemy who follows no norms of war, you have to speak to that enemy in a language that enemy understands. Okay.
Right.
If you are going to follow norms and the enemy is completely ruthless and cruel, you will lose.
Yeah.
Right? So King Suheldev, not only did he defeat the Ghaznavid Turks, he killed every single one of them. Didn't leave one person alive. Didn't say, "Ki, I've defeated you, now go back." None of those. His thing was, "Ki, I have to be cold and ruthless with them so they will learn a lesson and they will not dare to come back." Because his attitude was, my primary duty as a warrior is to protect my people. And if to protect my people, I have to be cold and ruthless to the enemy, I should be cold and ruthless to the enemy.
Amish, as a diplomat, so how does, according to you, the world see India from outside today?
If I have to be honest, I know many of us think that the world sees us negatively because of what we read in the Western media, the mainstream media. But the Western mainstream media has much reduced influence in the Western world also at this point of time. Largely, we are seen positively among most of the common people, among businessmen, etc. But the real problem is not whether they see us positively or negatively. The real problem is most of them actually ignore us. For a country which is the fifth largest economy in the world, the second largest population in the world, one of the most consequential countries in the world, India, most people actually ignore. We're not even covered that much. To me, that is the biggest problem. The fact that we are ignored. When we are seen, we are largely seen positively than negatively. Most importantly, we are actually ignored most of the time.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's
as we become bigger, it'll change. But mostly. That dharma is often wrongly translated as religion. Dharma is not religion. Religion is panth. Okay. So you can say Hinduism is a panth, Islam is a panth, Sikhism is a panth, Jainism, Buddhism, Christianity, they are panths. Dharma is not religion. Dharma, the root of the word dharma is dhru, that which unites society, that which balances the universe, that which brings order. So dharma is beyond religion.
Okay.
And in a sense, all of us are trying to be in alignment with dharma.